possibility very common. Even expert drivers can make mistakes equals it is possible for even expert drivers to make mistakes. I don't understand how he can be so stupid. If it rains, we can hold the meeting indoors equals it will be possible for us to. This sense of can is often found in the negative with cannot or can't. Sometimes can equals possibility has a habitual meaning which can be paraphrased by the use of the adverb sometimes lightning can be very dangerous equals lightning is sometimes very dangerous. A. Colloquially, can equals possibility is very often a proposal for future action we can see about that tomorrow. In fact, with second and third person subjects, can expresses a familiar though tactful imperative, the type of imperative that might be used by the captain of a sports team to the team members, or by the producer of a play to its cast. Mike and Willie, you can be standing over there. And Janet can enter from behind that curtain. Can function as an offer, I can give you a hand for a few minutes, if you need help. B. In questions such as can you come inside? Or more indirect equivalent such as I wonder if you can help me. Can equals possibility takes on the force of a rather polite request. Note that the adverb possibly can intensify such a request. Can you possibly lend me an umbrella? B. Ability common. Paula can't sing, but she can play the guitar equals knows how to. You can work harder than this equals are capable of. Can you read and write? Of course I can. Can in this sense is more or less synonymous with be capable of. When it refers to an acquired ability as in can you speak Greek. Can is also more or less equivalent to know how to. A. With verbs of inert perception and inert cognition there is little difference between being able to do something and actually doing it, so can tends to lose its distinctive modal meaning. I can remember scarcely differs from I remember as a means of referring to a state of recall. Similarly, there is little difference between I can't understand it and I don't understand it. B. There is no clear-cut distinction between can equals ability and can equals possibility. The two meanings are especially close because ability implies possibility, that is, if someone has the ability to do X, then X is possible. However, as can equals ability and can equals permission require a human or at least animate subject, the possibility sense is the only one available when the subject is inanimate, as in appearances can be deceptive. C. The common verbal construction be able to is not always associated with the ability meaning. Like can, it can be used to express possibility and even permission when the children are grown up, you will be able to live more cheaply. B. Permission less common. You can stay here as long as you like equals you're allowed to. Residents can use the car park without a permit. Can I see the letter you wrote? Sure, you can keep it. Linguistic lawmakers of the past have considered may to be the correct auxiliary of permission, and have condemned the use of can. Generations of English-speaking schoolchildren have been reprimanded for saying can I? Instead of may I? Yet in fact, can is much more widely used as an auxiliary of permission than may. In asking and giving permission, can and may are almost interchangeable, except that may is more formal, and is sometimes felt to be more polite. A. One place where can cannot replace may equals permission is in the fixed phrase if I may, used as a polite formula I'll leave my car in the garage, if I may. B. The meaning of permission is strengthened to something like strong recommendation in more or less joking or offensive remarks such as you can forget about your holiday. If he doesn't like it he can lump it. This chicken is half cooked. Must, like may, is a middle frequency modal which is suffering a decline in use in present-day English. Its obligation meaning, in particular, is used less frequently than it used to be. The meanings are 117a. Obligation speakers authority quite common. You must be back by 10 o'clock. You are obliged by me to. Tell Betty she must be more careful with her money. I must go now, or I'll be late. The usual implication of must equals obligation is that the speaker is the person who exerts authority over the person s mentioned in the clause. Consistent with this principle, I must and we must convey the idea of self-obligation. The speaker exerts power over himself, herself and possibly others. Like may, musting questions and if clauses involves the hearer's authority, instead of that of the speaker. Must I answer those questions? Means is that what you require? Here we note a special sarcastic use of must with you. Must you make that ghastly noise? For heaven's sake stop it. If you must behave like a hoodlum, at least make sure the neighbors aren't watching. Remembering that must here indicates obligation, that is self-obligation by the hearer, we can see in this an element of irony, as if the speaker pays lip service to the idea that the hearer acts under internal compulsion rather than by free will. If you must smoke, use an ashtray could be expanded if you are under compulsion to smoke, but of course you aren't. Smoking is just a nasty habit you could break if you wanted to. Be requirement quite common. Often the meaning of must is more impersonal than in the examples above, and is better captured by the label of requirement. Old people must be treated with sympathy and understanding. All students must register for the examinations by Monday 10th March. As a crime has been committed, there must now be a trial. In paraphrasing these sentences, we might say it is essential that or it is necessary to. But it is difficult to draw a dividing line between this use and that of obligation. A variant of the requirement meaning of must is found in examples like these. 1. If we want to change society, we must be prepared for struggle and sacrifice. 2. To compete with the world, our workforce must adapt to the 21st century. The italicized if clause in 1 or to infinitive clause in 2 describes a desirable goal, and the main clause with must then specifies a precondition that has to be achieved. C. Logical necessity common. He's not home yet, he must be working late at the office. That is necessarily the case, no other explanation is possible. Her head is hot and clammy, she must have a temperature. Must is used here of knowledge arrived at by inference or reasoning rather than by direct experience. For each example we could add the comment. A. There is an understandable feeling that knowledge acquired indirectly, by inference, is less certain than knowledge derived from direct experience. Hence logical necessity can easily be weakened to reasonable assumption. This weakening is evident in remarks like you must be Mr. Jones, that is, I assume/take it that you are Mr. Jones. There is a further weakening in estimations like you must. The meanings of have to correspond closely to those of must. 118a. Obligation common, you have to be back by 10 o'clock, it is obligatory. She'll have to sleep in the kitchen. I have to take 5 of these pills every day. The meaning of have to differs from sense A of must above in that the authority or influence of the speaker is not involved. Have to expresses obligation or requirement without specifying the person exercising power or influence. The constraining power may be some authority figure such as a doctor or an employer, the government, or simply the power of circumstances. A. By an evasive strategy of politeness, however, have to can indirectly imply the speaker's involvement. Someone will have to do the shopping. B. Furthermore, there is an ironic use of have to in conversation, whereby someone's willful behavior is disguised as something they can't avoid. I don't know why that guy has to try out his new car on a Sunday afternoon. My ex-husband just had to buy the most expensive one. B. Requirement common, as with must. There is the closely related meaning of have to in which the required course of action is general or public, and for which a paraphrase with it is essential to or it is necessary to is more appropriate. The Department of Education will have to rethink its policy equals the Department of Education will be compelled to rethink its policy. The garden has to be watered every day. Pensioners have to be careful with their money. Also, as with must, have to in this sense can express a practical necessity. Some kind of action is a necessary or required condition to keep warm. Elk have to eat and move around. She had to wait 5 minutes before being served. Sometimes, the goal is obvious, and does not need to be stated. Mrs. Harris has to please her customers. C. Logical necessity, chiefly colloquial me. There has to be some reason for his absurd behavior. That is necessarily the case, no other explanation is possible. You have to be joking. Everybody has to die sometime, Pal, a jokingly obvious statement. Although gaining in popularity, have to in the logical necessity sense is less usual than must, especially in BRE where it is still felt to be an Americanism. The alternative construction have got to, especially in its reduced form gotta, is a likely substitute for have to logical necessity in ME. For example, you've gotta be joking. A. Have to has question and negative forms both with and without the auxiliary do. Do you have to go now? Have you to go now? The second of these, however, is now rare, and is confined to BRE. B. The meanings of have to tend to merge, especially in scientific and mathematical writing, for the same reason as applies to the different meanings of may. To take a linguistic example, every clause has to contain a finite verb could be interpreted either every clause is required by the rules of the language to contain a finite verb, or it is necessarily the case that every clause contains a finite verb. In examples like this, the boundary between obligation, requirement and logical necessity is an indistinct one. C. Have got to, often reduced in speech to gotta, is a verbal construction similar to have to, favored in informal usage.